My name is Edward Whitmore. I'm 52 years old, and I spent the last 18 years of my life building Summit Technologies from a struggling mid-size firm into a major player in the enterprise software industry. As Senior Vice President of Strategic Partnerships, I had negotiated deals worth over $280 million during my tenure. I lived in a comfortable 3-bedroom house in Westchester County, New York, drove a reliable 2019 Honda Accord, and had built a reputation for integrity that opened doors across the East Coast and beyond. The story I'm about to tell you happened between February and July of 2024, and it taught me that sometimes the most devastating betrayals come from the people you least expect. If you enjoy stories of cold-blooded revenge and gripping plot twists, like this video and subscribe to the channel now. There are brand new, unreleased stories here every day, each one more intense than the last. It all started with Meridian Industries, a Fortune 500 manufacturing conglomerate, looking to modernize their entire IT infrastructure. Their CTO, Patricia Rodriguez, had reached out to me directly after hearing about my work with similar companies. The potential contract was worth $22 million over 3 years, the largest single deal in Summit's history. For 4 months, from February through May, I worked 16-hour days. I flew to their headquarters in Detroit 8 times. I restructured our entire proposal 3 times to meet their specific requirements. I personally guaranteed implementation timelines that would require our team to work around the clock. Patricia Rodriguez trusted me because we had built a professional relationship over 2 years of industry conferences and smaller collaborations. The negotiations were brutal. Meridian's procurement team questioned every line item, every deliverable, every warranty clause. I spent countless nights in hotel rooms revising contracts, adjusting pricing models, and coordinating with our legal team back in New York. My wife Sarah barely saw me during those months, but she understood the significance of this deal. It would secure jobs for our entire company and set us up for expansion into new markets. Jonathan Prescott, the CEO's 29-year-old son, had joined Summit Technologies 8 months earlier as Director of Business Development, a title that came with a corner office, a $145,000 salary, and 0 meaningful responsibilities. Jonathan had an MBA from Wharton, drove a red 2021 Tesla Model 3, and spent most of his time networking at expensive Manhattan restaurants. He showed up to maybe half of our Monday morning meetings and contributed nothing more than buzzwords and motivational platitudes. During the Meridian negotiations, Jonathan occasionally asked me for updates. "How are things progressing with that big manufacturing deal?" he would say, leaning against my office doorframe with his designer coffee. I kept him informed as a courtesy, never imagining he was taking notes for reasons other than general company interest. On May 18, 2024, I finally closed the Meridian deal. Patricia Rodriguez signed the contract at 3:47 p.m. Eastern Time. I immediately called CEO Robert Prescott to share the news. "Edward, this is incredible," he said. "This changes everything for Summit. We need to celebrate this properly." I felt a satisfaction I hadn't experienced in years. 18 years of dedication, relationship building, and expertise had culminated in this moment. I drove home that evening thinking about the promotion I had been promised, the bonus structure we had discussed, and the recognition that would finally acknowledge my contribution to Summit's success. 3 days later, everything changed. On May 21st, Robert Prescott called me into his office at 9 a.m. sharp. I walked in expecting to discuss my promotion and the implementation timeline for Meridian. Instead, I found Jonathan sitting in the chair across from his father's desk, wearing a smug smile that should have been my first warning. "Edward, sit down," Robert said, his tone unusually formal. "I wanted to personally thank you for all your support on the Meridian deal. Jonathan has done an exceptional job leading this negotiation, and I'm proud of the initiative he's shown." I felt the blood drain from my face. "I'm sorry, what?" Jonathan leaned forward. "Dad, I told you Edward was being modest about his role. He provided valuable assistance during the process, especially with some of the technical details." Valuable assistance, technical details. I had spent 4 months of my life, missed my daughter's college graduation in May, and sacrificed countless evenings with my family to close this deal. I had been the sole point of contact with Patricia Rodriguez. My name was on every email, every contract revision, every meeting summary. "Robert," I said carefully, "I think there might be some confusion here. I was the lead negotiator on Meridian from day one. I have documentation of every interaction, every meeting, every—" "Edward," Robert interrupted, "I appreciate your enthusiasm, but Jonathan has been keeping me updated throughout the process. He's shown real leadership potential, and frankly, this is exactly the kind of strategic thinking we need from the next generation." I looked at Jonathan. He was examining his fingernails with practiced indifference. "I'm happy to share the spotlight, Edward. Team effort and all that. The spotlight, the deal that would define Summit's future for the next decade, and he was graciously offering to share the spotlight for work I had done entirely myself. "I'd like to see the documentation that shows Jonathan's involvement," I said, keeping my voice level. Robert's expression hardened. "Edward, I'm not sure I like your tone. Are you questioning my son's integrity?" That was the moment I realized what was happening. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a calculated theft, and Robert Prescott was either complicit or willfully blind. Jonathan had been gathering intelligence from our conversations and presenting my progress as his own work. "Of course not," I said. "I'm simply trying to understand the chain of communication." "The chain of communication runs through Jonathan," Robert replied. "He's been managing client relationships at the executive level while you handled the operational details. Different skill sets, Edward. That's why we work as a team. Operational details. 18 years of strategic partnerships, and I was being reduced to operational details." Jonathan finally spoke up. "Edward, I know this transition might feel challenging, but I think there's a real opportunity for you to learn from this experience. Maybe take on more of a supporting role going forward." A supporting role. In the company I had helped build, reporting to someone who couldn't negotiate a coffee order without help. "I think I need some time to process this," I said, standing up. "Actually, Edward," Robert said, "we need to discuss your future here at Summit. Jonathan has brought some concerns to my attention about your attitude lately. The resistance to new leadership, the reluctance to adapt to our evolving corporate structure." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "What kind of concerns?" Jonathan sighed dramatically. "I hate to bring this up, but there have been some issues with client communications. Patricia Rodriguez mentioned to me that she felt you were sometimes inflexible during negotiations. She specifically requested that I take a more active role in managing the relationship." That was an outright lie. Patricia Rodriguez had never spoken to Jonathan. I had her personal cell phone number, her direct email, and had been invited to her son's graduation party the following month. But Jonathan was betting that his word would carry more weight than mine. "I think we should call Patricia and clarify this," I said. "That won't be necessary," Robert replied quickly. "We've already discussed the situation with Meridian's executive team. They're comfortable with Jonathan serving as their primary point of contact going forward." I realized then that this wasn't just about stealing credit. This was about erasing me entirely from the narrative. Jonathan hadn't just taken my deal, he was positioning himself to manage the entire relationship, ensuring that any future success would be attributed to him alone. "So where does that leave me?" I asked. Robert and Jonathan exchanged a look. "We think it might be best if you took some time off," Robert said. "Clear your head. Think about whether Summit is still the right fit for your career goals. We'll call it a voluntary leave of absence." Voluntary. The word hung in the air like a threat. "And if I don't think a leave of absence is necessary, then we'll have to discuss other options," Robert said. "Summit is evolving, Edward. We need people who can evolve with us." I nodded slowly. "I understand completely." I walked out of that office knowing I had just been fired by the company I had spent nearly 2 decades building. But I also walked out knowing something that Jonathan and his father didn't. Patricia Rodriguez had never requested a change in leadership. Meridian's executive team had no idea who Jonathan Prescott was, and I had every email, every contract revision, and every meeting recording stored in my personal files. Jonathan Prescott had just made the biggest mistake of his privileged life. I spent that weekend in my home office, methodically organizing 18 years of professional documentation. Every email thread, every contract negotiation, every client interaction was stored across 3 external hard drives and backed up to a secure cloud server. My wife Sarah found me there Sunday evening, surrounded by printed emails and legal documents. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Building a case," I replied. The most damaging evidence was a series of emails between Patricia Rodriguez and myself from the previous week. She had specifically mentioned her excitement about working with me personally on the implementation phase, referencing conversations that had never included Jonathan. More importantly, she had copied me on internal Meridian communications that showed their leadership team discussing Edward Whitmore's expertise and his understanding of our infrastructure needs. Jonathan had claimed Patricia requested his involvement. The email trail proved she didn't even know he existed. Monday morning, May 24th, I called Patricia directly. "Patricia, this is Edward Whitmore. I wanted to touch base about the implementation timeline we discussed." "Edward, perfect timing," she said. "I was just telling my CTO how impressed we've been with your approach. When can we schedule the kickoff meeting?" "Actually, there's been a change in personnel on our side. Jonathan Prescott will be taking over as your primary contact." There was a long pause. "I'm sorry, who?" "Jonathan Prescott. He's Robert Prescott's son, our new Director of Business Development." "Edward, I've never heard this name before." "Are you being reassigned to another project?" "Something like that." "Well, that's concerning. We specifically chose Summit because of your track record. Our board approved this contract based on your presentation and your guaranteed involvement in the implementation. If you're not going to be managing this relationship, we need to discuss whether this partnership still makes sense." That was exactly what I had hoped to hear. "I understand your concerns, Patricia. Perhaps you should speak directly with Robert Prescott about the transition." "I think I will." Patricia Rodriguez called Robert Prescott that afternoon. I know this because she immediately called me afterward to share her confusion about the conversation. "Edward, I just spoke with your CEO. He assured me that his son has been managing our relationship from the beginning, but I have no record of any interactions with this Jonathan person. He also said you've been having performance issues, which frankly contradicts everything I've observed over the past 4 months." "Performance issues?" He mentioned something about client communication problems and resistance to new leadership. "Edward, I've worked with you on 3 different projects over 2 years. You're one of the most professional people I know. What's really going on there?" I chose my words carefully. "There have been some internal restructuring decisions that I don't entirely agree with. Well, I'm not comfortable moving forward without you involved. We've scheduled a call for Wednesday with Robert, his son, and me to clarify the situation. I think you should be on that call as well." Wednesday's conference call on May 26th was a masterpiece of corporate theater. Robert Prescott opened with his standard corporate cheerleading routine, praising Jonathan's visionary leadership and strategic oversight of the Meridian partnership. Jonathan delivered a practiced speech about seamless transitions and elevated service delivery. Patricia Rodriguez listened politely for about 3 minutes before cutting them off. "I appreciate the introduction, but I need to address some confusion. Jonathan, you mentioned that you've been my primary point of contact throughout the negotiation process. Can you tell me about our conversation regarding the database migration timeline?" There was silence. Jonathan cleared his throat. "Well, Patricia, I believe Edward handled most of the technical discussions while I focused on the strategic framework." "I see. And what about the pricing adjustments we discussed for the Chicago facility integration?" Another pause. "I'd have to review my notes on that specific conversation. What about the compliance requirements we discussed for the automotive division?" Again, I think Edward was more involved in those operational details. Patricia's voice took on a sharper edge. Jonathan, I'm asking about conversations that you claim to have had with me personally. If you were managing this relationship, surely you'd remember discussing our largest technical challenge. Jonathan was drowning, and everyone on the call knew it. Patricia, I think there might be some confusion about the division of responsibilities here. The only confusion is why I'm being told that someone I've never spoken to has been managing a $22 million contract negotiation. Robert Prescott jumped in. Patricia, I think we need to clarify the communication structure here. Jonathan has been providing executive oversight, while Edward handled the day-to-day interactions. Executive oversight of conversations that never happened? The call ended with Patricia requesting a detailed timeline of all interactions between Summit and Meridian, along with documentation of Jonathan's specific contributions to the negotiation process. She gave them 48 hours to provide this information. That evening, Jonathan called me directly. Edward, we need to talk. I'm on voluntary leave, remember? Look, there's been some confusion about roles and responsibilities. Maybe we can work together to clarify things for the client. What kind of clarification did you have in mind? Well, you obviously have detailed knowledge of the client conversations. Maybe you could help me prepare some documentation that shows my involvement in the strategic aspects. He was asking me to help him fabricate evidence of work he had never done. Jonathan, I think you should handle this on your own. You're the director of business development after all. Edward, I know you're upset about the transition, but we can work this out. There might be a place for you in the new structure. The new structure where I report to you. It doesn't have to be adversarial. We both want what's best for Summit. What's best for Summit is honest leadership and competent management. I'm trying to help you here, Edward. No, Jonathan. You're trying to save yourself. I hung up knowing that Jonathan Prescott was about to discover the difference between stealing credit and actually earning it. Patricia Rodriguez wasn't some middle manager who could be impressed with buzzwords and corporate rhetoric. She was a Fortune 500 CTO who had built her career on technical expertise and operational excellence. Jonathan had 48 hours to provide documentation of work that existed only in his imagination. Jonathan missed his 48-hour deadline. On Friday morning, May 28th, Patricia Rodriguez called Robert Prescott directly and informed him that Meridian Industries was suspending the contract pending a full review of Summit's management structure and communication protocols. She also mentioned that she would be sharing her concerns with other Fortune 500 CTOs in her professional network. In the enterprise software world, reputation travels fast. By the first week of June, 3 other companies that had been considering Summit for upcoming projects had quietly moved their business elsewhere. Word was spreading that Summit Technologies had misrepresented their leadership team and couldn't be trusted to deliver on major commitments. Robert Prescott called me on June 8th. Edward, we need to talk. Can you come in today? I'm on voluntary leave, remember? Edward, please. The Meridian situation has become complicated. How complicated? They're threatening to cancel the contract and pursue legal action for misrepresentation. They claim we lied about our management structure. I let the silence hang for a moment. That does sound complicated. Look, I think there may have been some miscommunication about Jonathan's role in the negotiation. Maybe we moved too fast with the transition. Miscommunication? Edward, I need you to call Patricia Rodriguez and smooth this over. You have a relationship with her. She trusts you. She trusts me because I've never lied to her. Nobody lied to anybody. There was just some confusion about responsibilities. Robert, your son claimed he managed a 4-month negotiation that he had zero involvement in. He told Patricia Rodriguez that she personally requested his leadership, which never happened. He couldn't answer basic questions about conversations that he pretended to have had. That's not confusion. That's fraud. Edward, please. I'm asking for your help here. The same help you offered me when you fired me for Jonathan's benefit? You weren't fired. You took voluntary leave. We both know what that meant. There was a long pause. What would it take to get you back? Full reinstatement, public acknowledgement of my role in the Meridian deal, and an apology. From both of you. Edward, be reasonable. I am being reasonable. I'm asking for the truth. I can offer you your old position back and a 15% raise. What about Jonathan? He'll continue in his current role, but with more clearly defined responsibilities. So he keeps his corner office and his $145,000 salary after attempting to steal a $22 million deal and lying to clients. Edward, he's my son. And that's exactly the problem. I hung up knowing that Robert Prescott would never hold his son accountable, which meant Jonathan would continue making decisions that would destroy the company I had helped build. On June 10th, I received a call from Patricia Rodriguez's legal team. Meridian Industries was formally canceling the contract and demanding return of their $450,000 advance payment. They were also considering a lawsuit for fraudulent misrepresentation and breach of fiduciary duty. But the real catastrophe was just beginning. Patricia Rodriguez had indeed shared her experience with her network. By mid-June, I was receiving calls from executives at 3 different companies who had been working with Summit on smaller contracts. They wanted to know if the leadership issues at Summit affected their projects as well. I answered their questions honestly. I told them about the management instability, the misrepresentation of key personnel, and the questionable decision-making processes that had led to the Meridian disaster. I didn't badmouth Summit directly, but I didn't sugarcoat the situation either. On June 18th, Robert Prescott called me again. His voice was different this time, desperate. Edward, we've lost 4 contracts this week. The board is asking questions I can't answer. I need you to come back immediately. What about Jonathan? We'll work something out. What kind of something? Maybe a lateral move, different responsibilities. Robert, your son committed fraud against our biggest client and destroyed your company's reputation. A lateral move isn't going to fix this. What do you want me to do? Fire my own son? I want you to do what any responsible CEO would do. Hold people accountable for their actions. I can't do that. Then you can't fix this. On June 25th, I received a call from David Morrison, Summit's head of HR. Edward, the board would like to meet with you this afternoon. The emergency board meeting was held in the conference room where I had presented the Meridian proposal just 4 months earlier. 5 board members, Robert Prescott and Jonathan, sat around the mahogany table. The atmosphere was tense. Board Chairman William Hayes spoke first. Edward, we understand there have been some internal disputes regarding the Meridian contract. We'd like to hear your perspective on what happened. I spent 30 minutes walking them through the timeline, supported by printed emails, meeting recordings, and client communications. I showed them Jonathan's complete absence from the negotiation process, his false claims to Patricia Rodriguez, and the resulting contract cancellation. I also shared the documented impact on Summit's reputation and client relationships. When I finished, Hayes turned to Jonathan. Do you have a response to these allegations? Jonathan had clearly prepared for this moment. I think Edward is understandably frustrated about the recent organizational changes. Sometimes when people feel their authority is threatened, they can become territorial about client relationships. That's not an answer to my question, Hayes replied. Did you or did you not claim to have personally managed the Meridian negotiation? I provided strategic oversight and executive guidance throughout the process. Show me one email, one meeting note, one document that proves your involvement in this negotiation. Jonathan couldn't, because no such documentation existed. The board voted unanimously to terminate Jonathan Prescott's employment effective immediately. They also voted to remove Robert Prescott as CEO, citing his failure to maintain proper oversight and his complicity in misrepresenting company capabilities to clients. They offered me the CEO position that afternoon. I accepted. By the end of July 2024, I managed to rebuild most of Summit's damaged relationships. Patricia Rodriguez agreed to resume our partnership under a modified contract worth $18 million. 3 of the other clients returned after seeing the management changes and accountability measures we had implemented. Jonathan Prescott's LinkedIn profile now describes him as an entrepreneurial consultant seeking new opportunities. He's been seeking for quite a while now. Sometimes the best revenge isn't something you do to your enemies. Sometimes it's simply letting them face the natural consequences of their own choices. Jonathan thought he could steal 18 years of relationship building and expertise. Instead, he learned that reputation and trust aren't inherited, they're earned. And once lost, they're almost impossible to recover. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video and leave a comment telling me what you thought. And if you're not already subscribed to the channel, please subscribe and hit the notification bell to get alerts for new stories like this one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.